Hello all you adorable fluff butts out there, Kitthesoulless here, and today I want to talk about something that I find rather important. You see, a lot of people who know me know my thoughts on things like hatred and intolerance. Though, for those who don't, I will point out very simply that I believe people should be allowed to live how they choose, believe what they want, and love who they want. I believe that everyone should have the right to make their own choices, and so long as their choices do not infringe upon the rights of another, I don't believe they should be forced to live in fear for the choices they've made. Now, in contemplating this concept, I inevitably had to ask myself a question that I want to pose to all of you out there watching now. Should we tolerate the intolerance of others? And this is actually where today's topic comes into play, because I want to briefly cover a concept called the paradox of tolerance. So strap yourselves in, perk up those ears, and enjoy the ride. So, what is tolerance? What does this word mean? Well, if we look at the Oxford Dictionary, it defines tolerance as the ability or willingness to tolerate something. In particular, the existence of opinions or behaviors that one does not necessarily agree with. What this means, at least in my own understanding, is that tolerance is a person's willingness to accept that there are people who are different than them, or who may not always agree with them. This, in my own personal opinion, has to come from both sides of an argument for it to be meaningful as well. Let's take, for example, two sides of a simple argument. One individual likes buffalo sauce, and yes, I know you're watching this, and you are the subject here, we both know who you are, so I'm not going to name names. But they love the tang of it and the bite of it, and could put it on literally anything. While the other person sees it as nothing more than an overpowering taste of vinegar and believes it's unpleasant and shouldn't be considered edible. Tolerance would be acknowledging that the individual who opposes your belief or stance on the matter has their reason to do so, and that they're allowed to disagree with you. Now, this is also somewhat where people confuse the concept of tolerance with acceptance. In this case, believing that by tolerating this person's stance, you are agreeing with them in spite of your own beliefs, rather than simply acknowledging that they have the right to disagree. And on the argument of buffalo sauce, again, you know who you are. If one of these days I offer you something with a proper, balanced buffalo sauce, I do hope you'll be willing to at least give it a nibble. If you still don't like it, well okay then, at least we can both say you tried it. But if you choose not to, that'll be okay too. In 1945, a philosopher, academic, and social commentator by the name of Karl Popper published a book titled The Open Society and Its Enemies, in which he wrote about the paradox of tolerance, stating, "Less well known is the paradox of tolerance. Unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed and tolerance with them." In this formulation, I do not imply, for instance, that we should always suppress the utterance of intolerant philosophies. As long as we can counter them by rational argument and keep them in check by public opinion, suppression would certainly be most unwise. But we should claim the right to suppress them if necessary, even by force, for it may easily turn out that they are not prepared to meet us on the level of rational argument, but begin by denouncing all argument. They may forbid their followers to listen to rational argument because it is deceptive, and teach them to answer arguments by use of their fists or pistols. We should therefore claim, in the name of tolerance, the right to not tolerate the intolerant. We should claim that any movement preaching intolerance places itself outside the law, and we should consider incitement to intolerance and persecution as criminal, in the same way as we should consider incitement to murder, or to kidnapping, or to the revival of the slave trade as criminal. Now, what does all of this mean? It means that, while espousing intolerance is dangerous, people should have the right to do it. Shocking conclusion, isn't it? The reason for this thought is that, more often than not, intolerance is something that can be debunked, disproven, or combated with a rational argument. Meet someone who's a racist? Accept that they have the belief and question it. Doing this does not mean that you're accepting their belief. On the contrary, it means you're challenging them to defend what is, to a majority of humanity, indefensible. At the same time, though, it means that while we should strive to be tolerant, we can't be endlessly or unwaveringly tolerant of everyone and everything. If someone whose belief you've challenged, for example, is unwilling to have a civil and rational conversation about the disagreement, and instead tries to shout you down or worse, you should reserve the right to stop tolerating their behavior, and if the need arises, do what you have to stop them from causing harm to you or to others. Now, to answer the question from my end that I posed at the beginning of this video, yes, I believe that we should be tolerant of intolerance. I believe that we should wholeheartedly, though I don't believe that we should be infinitely tolerant. I reached this conclusion on a personal level a long time ago, and in doing so, I've also learned to accept that there are times when we must be intolerant for the sake of a tolerant society. This belief is actually part of the foundation of how I communicate with others through this channel. You see, a lot of people in the last few years have come up against my policy of civility in the comments section. I will generally allow people to question, comment, and what have you with anything they see fit, so long as they remain civil and open to rational conversation. They may change my mind, they may not, but so long as they adhere to these simple rules, they have the right to say what they please. I tolerate their views being made known regardless of whether or not I personally accept or agree with them. On the other side of that same coin, though, I am intolerant of those who try to attack others, degrade them, or who simply are unwilling to allow the conversation to remain civil. So, on a personal level, I tolerate intolerance to a degree, whether it comes from someone else or whether it's coming from me. I don't enjoy having to silence someone's voice, but if they're unwilling to accept that others may not always agree with them, or attempt to attack others for their beliefs, then for the sake of an open-minded and tolerant environment, I sometimes have to. It's because of this belief as well that, on occasion, I will simply refuse to continue discussing a particular topic. If the majority of people surrounding a particular issue prove that they will attack anyone who dares oppose their belief, then I simply won't have the discussion with them. I see no point in trying to have a rational conversation with those who want nothing more than to force their views on others and vilify those who don't immediately conform to their ideology. Anyhow, that's the end of this rant, but I'd love to know your thoughts on the topic of this video. Leave a comment down below, share your own thoughts on the matter, and see what kind of discussions come from it. You never know. You might learn something new in the process. But until next time, Fluffs, bye-bye.